Hi everyone, I'm here for this block with Aaron van Wirdum, a very famous journalist in Bitcoin. So let's try this experiment in meta-journalism with some questions.
It's the journalist's favorite thing, where they interview each other and talk about journalism and how journalism should be and can be improved. So
let's start.
Do it.
Okay, in your talk during the Milan meetup, you already touched this point, but I think it's very important to stress it again. Why, in your opinion, is so difficult to find good quality journalism in the space?
So there's kind of two parts to that answer, I would say. The first question is, why is it so hard to find quality journalism? Like, forget about Bitcoin and blockchain in general. And I think this has a lot to do with the way journalism has evolved over the past 20 years, because it really evolved from a model where people would pay for the articles, right? They would pay for a newspaper, and that was a big income stream for journalists. That kind of disappeared with the appearance of the internet, with the emergence of the internet. So it has really shifted to just getting as much eyeballs as possible, right? The whole click, as many clicks as possible. That's really where the money is. So instead of quality, it's really becoming more about quantity, and the sort of stuff that works well to get, a lot of clicks is kind of the more hypey journalism. I mean, the clickbait is obvious. Yeah. But also the hypey, like the news, day-to-day sort of the stuff that's happening, rather than the longer trends and the more background journalism. That's expensive to do, and it doesn't bring as much money. So that's part of the problem. Well, then the other part is, so I think this is particularly bad for Bitcoin and blockchain journalism, because in general, the newsy day-to-day stuff that happens is almost always bad for Bitcoin. That sort of sheds a negative light on Bitcoin. You have your price crashes or your exchange hacks or that sort of stuff. While the more interesting trends that are going on, that's a much bigger story and doesn't get the same level of attention. So that would be my two-part answer.
I totally recommend all the talk, and the link is in the description of this video. You are known as a journalist who gives great technical contents and has the ability to explain to outsiders very complex technical topics. But your background is not technical, right? How did you find out doing this so well? And also, do you think a computer science background is neither needed or a nice to have?
Yeah, so my background is really in more like history and politics and that sort of stuff, and that's also what attracted me to Bitcoin. It's a new way of doing money. It's a new way of organizing society, and if it really get mainstream adopted or anything like that, it could really change how we all cooperate and things. Now, is it a benefit to not have a technical background? I think there's two sides of the coin. It's harder for me to understand new stuff. It can take longer, especially when I just started getting in. Like now it's a bit easier because now I have a pretty good grasp of how the whole machine works. But when I got into it, I had to ask a lot of dumb questions to developers, and it took me a while to understand it. But then once I do understand it, I have a better understanding of the mindset of other people who aren't technical, and what helps them understand it better. So I think that's a big benefit if you don't have a technical background. If you do have a technical background, you don't really know what other people understand as well. So that's a big benefit for me of not having a technical background.
During the last years, and especially during 2017, you were on the front line during all the fights for the soul of Bitcoin, sorry. Some blamed you for being too aligned, some really appreciated your takes. What is your position between a supposed necessary neutrality and the symmetrical representation of all the position, and the importance to give your sincere opinion on facts?
Right. So, there are kind of two schools of thought in the field of journalism on this topic. So the sort of dominant school of thought has objectivity as sort of its highest ideal, and you know, the journalist is sort of the outside observer that doesn't have any perspective or opinion on the matter and just reports on it. Now, there's a smaller school of thought that criticizes this the ideal of objectivity because journalists are human beings and you cannot be objective. It's just fundamentally impossible. Every human being necessarily has a perspective on the world and on what's true and what's not true and what's important and what's not important, and this is embedded in their work even if they don't want it to. So the answer there, so instead of objectivity, the goal is to be transparent. So that's what I do. I'm transparent about, okay, this is why I think Bitcoin is important. These are my personal perspectives on this whole debate. And especially on like social media, I put it out there. Like, this is what I consider important. This is what I consider true. This is how I see this whole debate. And then if you're a reader and you're reading my article, then you can sort of read it through that lens. Now, that said, I do absolutely try to be honest in my articles. I'm not trying to twist the truth or anything like that. This is my honest perspective, but this is what I feel is honestly true. You know, I've written articles, like an example would be the 2x or no 2x kind of thing, where I sort of lay it out. And I personally feel that was a very honest representation of both sides. And I really do try to be neutral in that sense, to give the arguments both sides, and people should decide for themselves what they think is important. But I would be lying to my audience if I wouldn't be transparent about, okay, but this is what I think. So, you know, if you want to, you can read your article through that lens.
So the last questions. Nassim Taleb talked a lot about the advantages of having skin in the game. In your opinion, can journalists with conflict of interest be more reliable than the ones who made a lot of disclosures like, I don't know, Bitcoin or any cryptocurrencies? A journalist with Bitcoin is more biased or more neutral? Also considering that it's almost impossible to demonstrate that he or she doesn't own any cryptocurrency.
Yeah, so in my case, I write for a Bitcoin audience. The people who write who read my articles and who like my articles are people who are into Bitcoin. That's also a Bitcoin magazine. That's what we do. Our audience is already into Bitcoin. So for me, there's no point in like selling Bitcoin to my audience, which I wouldn't want to do, because the people I write for have it, and the people who don't have it don't write my articles. So there's no selling Bitcoin going on, or there's no pumping Bitcoin. I think at least that's not. I hope that's not the case. That's not what I would want to do. Now, the general criticism here, it does tie in with the previous point, because if you take this to the extreme, or if you continue along this argument, then where do you stop? Journalists are always affected by the world around them. By this logic, you shouldn't write about the politics that are happening in your country, because that affects you. Like, which president is going to be elected, that affects you. If you own a home, then you shouldn't be talking about like home prices going up or down. So you're always affected by the world around you. Now, in my case, I do hold Bitcoin. I do think it's important, again, to be transparent about that. So it's right in my bio, I hold Bitcoin. You can read my articles through that lens. Maybe that will make you not take the article seriously, that's fine. But I think most of our readers don't really mind. And I think it also has some advantages of, you know, if I'm really involved in Bitcoin in a way, then I maybe get a feel for things that if you don't hold any Bitcoin, you might not get. Like, how easy is it to use, or... You know.
I agree, it's all about the transparency once again. Thank you very much for taking the time to answer to all these questions and for being in Milan. And see you again soon.
Thanks.
Bye.